Welcome to TAP. So glad you are with us today. I have a wonderful guest with me, and I think we're gonna speak about the Enneagram and our spirituality. That's what I think. But let's see where it goes. Welcome so much, Indra Rinzler.
Thanks for having me on your program.
Spirituality, been in spirituality for more than 50 years. I thought I'd love to start just to hear, yeah, how your spiritual journey began. Um, can you say something about where you're coming from with all of this?
Well, I don't, I can tell you a little bit of the story. Where I'm coming from, I have absolutely no idea, nor do I know where I'm going. But the reality of it is that the early 70s, I moved to California. I grew up in the East Coast and I moved across the country, the US. And when I got to California, I found that there were metaphysical bookstores, which I didn't really know before. It was not We didn't talk about that on Twitter and Facebook because we didn't have Twitter and Facebook. So we didn't know anything. And so I started going to metaphysical bookstores and I started my search on spirituality, reading the books in the bookstore. And a lot of them were astrology. So that started back then too. And I like to say, and I don't know what term I used back then, but it's kind of like I was looking for myself. I was trying to find happiness. I was trying to understand life. Whatever we used back in 1970, that's kind of what I was looking for. There wasn't addicted. There wasn't 50 years of a corporate job because I kind of rejected that right away. I just kind of I grew up in Manhattan and what I saw around me wasn't happiness and success. It was unhappiness and success. And so that didn't really hold much for me.
Mm.
And so it was a searching, but there's a teaching in India called nete, not this, not that.
Yeah.
It's easy to know what it isn't, but it is a long process to figure out what it is. And so we begin by rejecting what we know and looking for new things that come along. And so that's where I began. I started a community, a commune, which was a popular term back then, not so much popular today, but living with other people. And I lived in a spiritual community for 20 years, dedicated to a famous Indian teacher. And then I left that, graduated from that, and then started traveling the world. I'm going to go to be in India here in about 3 weeks. I've been traveling to Asia for 25 years, and most of my winters have been over there, and only a few over here, and most of them because of COVID. And
But you're still going strong. You're still traveling and teaching,
yeah,
and you're not that young. I mean,
I'm not young at all, but young at heart, I'm coming into my own, I just starting with the books. Why now? Well, I can tell you astrologically, but it just there's no right or wrong, there's no good or bad. There isn't. I mean, we can understand it. We think we can understand it, and we use the mind to try to understand it, or we can use our intuition to try to understand it, but it just is, and it doesn't really need any more explanation from that. Everybody has their own bell-shaped curve.
yeah, okay. So I want to talk to you about the Enneagram mostly because it's something that I've had in the periphery of my mind. Like I've interviewed people about it a long time ago, and I've heard a lot of people know the Enneagram who don't know astrology. So many people who come to me is sharing with me about their type. And then I kind of try to gather it, take it, combine it with astrology. Maybe a seven is this, or it's most
Yeah.
in that quadrant, like try to make some kind of pattern out of it. But I'm actually not sure because I don't know that much about the Enneagram. Can you share something about like what is your interest in the Enneagram in the first place?
Well, interestingly enough, I took my first Enneagram class about 25 years ago. And in that weekend class, I immediately recognized, while the Enneagram was totally new, I immediately recognized the astrology in it.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to meet a teacher. 3 years later, he said to me, not 3 years later, a few months later, he said to me that there were only three people who knew where he was and what he could do. And I was lucky enough to meet one of them. And he had a system. He was intuitive at birth. He started with Vedic astrology in his teens. He had a neighbor that was teaching him Vedic astrology, and he had intuited a system of trying to understand Enneagram and astrology together. So Enneagram is Enneagram means, I'm going to give a little background for the people that
Yes.
don't know. Okay,
Thank
which
you.
might be your next question. And so the idea here is that Enneagram is not Greek, but the name is Greek, and it means nine-sided figure, and it's three geometric shapes combined: the circle, the for unity, the 3-6-9 triangle, which is the law of three. This is from Gurdjieff, who a lot of young people don't know anymore, and that's okay. But he gave this to us, but he never told us where it came from or what it means. And the third geometric shape is called a hexag, and it's 6 points. So the 9 points are created in these three geometric shapes, and you can put anything at the points. And in the 60s, a man decided to put personalities at the point. What became the Enneagram of personality? That there are 9 personality types. And while it is an incredible psychological tool to help us, it is deeper because these are the nine personality types, and they have the ability to unwind what I call the 5,000 years of Judeo-Christian tradition, all the crap that's been handed down from generation to generation, all of the conditioning and all the misunderstandings. The Enneagram can wipe it away by understanding the core triggers, and which teach us in the not psychologically and not astrologically, but spiritually, they teach us our core triggers and then invite us to live in the moment. Psychology doesn't really have an end game. The end game is the end game is to observe behavior, but there's no way to get out of that. There's no way. There's not what they could consider normal behavior is not normal. It is normal for a triggered, successful person, but it is not that is not the goal spiritually of the spiritual teachers, which is to get us to the moment and to let all of it go.
So that is the end goal of any of the types.
Well, the end goal spiritually of the types is to live in the moment, is to get rid of all the core triggers.
Mm. No matter which personality you have.
Absolutely, no matter what the triggers are, the idea is to get beyond them and to what I like to say is that it's not that we let go of preferences, but we let go of the compulsion and obsession around the uh,
Well, the attachment.
preferences.
Yeah, yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. So,
So now, when we get to the Enneagram,
Yeah.
there are three core centers of intelligence or instincts. That's anger, emotion, and fear. And while we have all three of them in us, um, one of them is at our core.
Mhm.
Now, separately from that, there are three reactions to energy coming toward us. There are those that go outward to it.
Mhm.
They are extroverted in nature.
Mhm.
There are those that pull back from it. They're more introverted in nature. And there are those that live in a active neutral strategy of observing before behavior.
That sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, none of them are either good nor bad. They just are.
Okay.
Okay. So,
Okay.
three directions of energy times three core instants gives us 9 unique energetic Enneagram vibrational signatures. And so the 8 is the anger outward. So we give them numbers, but there's not a hierarchy and it's not numerology. It's just a number. They also have names, but of course we don't agree on the names. So we use the numbers. So 8 is anger outward, and that's the beginning of the archetype. 9 is anger neutral, and 1 is anger inward. That's the perfectionist. And I can go through them if you want me to. I'll give you this, but if you want me to go through the descriptions of each one.
I'd love to. I'd love to hear.
Okay. So the 8 is the anger outward, and that's called the boss, or the I can't think of another name right at the moment, but we call it the boss, and it's the most assertive personality. Jack Nicholson, if you know the actor, it's it's all offense. There's no defense. The idea is that they have a teddy bear in their heart, and they don't want anybody to know that. So they cover it up by being very assertive and very confident and kind of pushy. Okay, the 9 is the active neutral, and it's called they're called the peacemakers. They're the ones who accommodate other people. They are easygoing. They seem to be very loving, but they're not very. They disconnect from themselves. So each one has a strategy. It has a skill, which is a strategy is to be dominating as the 8. And the skill is the confidence. So for the 9, the strategy is to disconnect from ourselves, so that we don't feel, because the peacemaker, the nervous system gets distracted by disharmony in their aura, in their environment. Not just in their aura, but in their environment. And so on the high side, they teach us love, because they disconnect from themselves, and they don't really have an issue other than the disconnection. The 1 is the perfectionist. This is anger inward, and they solve their problems by making sure that everything is done right. They're feeling inadequate and defective. And on the high side, they teach us perfectionism. They teach us to hold to a higher standard, not the made up, internalized higher standard, but the Gandhi was a 1. Somebody we just had a discussion yesterday. Graham Hancock, the archaeologist. Somebody said that he knew him, and he thinks he's a 1. So it's a very righteous. With frustration and resentment underneath it. So then we come into the emotion body. 2 is the outward, called the helper. They help other people in a way because they're feeling unworthy of being loved. So they compulsively help other people in order to not feel their unworthiness, in order to create a codependency, in order to be seen for what the wonderful that they can do. The 3 neutral is also the assertive type, is the producer, and they're the higher achievers, the type A's, the higher achievers. They're chameleons. They're the narcissists, but they're also chameleons, because they don't actually know themselves very well. In astrology, interestingly enough, one of the patterns is an empty 1st and 7th house. So they have a disconnection from themselves, but in that they have very strong planets. And so they move among the planets to be able to be very achieving in society, but at the same time, not really knowing themselves. The 4 is the individualist. This is emotion inward. And these are the artists. These are the creatives, the beautiful people. Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, Dylan, Bob Dylan. They use adjectives and elegance and style in a way that nobody else can. That they can walk across the room and everybody's, holding their breath, because it's just the old poetry in motion. Okay, so then the 5 is the inward fear. This is the observer. They protect themselves by knowing how things work, by studying and understanding. They go very mental. They get very overwhelmed with other people. Buddha was a 5. They teach us the high side is wisdom, that they hold wisdom. 6 is the loyalist. This is fear neutral, and they have the doubt. They have the apprehension about possible future events. They loyalty, the duty. They teach us duty and courage and loyalty. And then the last but not least is the 7. This is fear outward. This is my place. The enthusiast. We are the storytellers. We are the greener pastures is our mantra. If some is good, then more is better. And so we're the gluttony. We're excessive and too much, and it's a strategy of not touching into our feelings. That inner emptiness is the key struggle. So those are the 9 types.
Thank you for that. Okay, I have so many comments. Let's see if I can start from the end here, where you're talking about the 7, and you're saying one is not enough. I don't know.
If some is good, then more is better.
More is better, right? And I'm thinking of this slogan: one is not enough. No, one is too much. 1,000 is not enough. It's like the addictive personality type potentially.
Absolutely.
Okay, good. I work in addiction, so I could sort of like, okay.
Other people can be addictive too in their own ways, but the addictive personality, this is more 7.
Okay. So what else? I come to think of 2 things at least. Let's see. Okay, let me first ask you, how does this come to be? Because in astrology, at least in evolutionary astrology, there's a whole philosophy behind why your chart is the way that it is. Now, what about in the Enneagram? Why have you become the type? Sorry?
It's in the chart. So we're already born with it. My teacher, who was a 9, remembered, he said, being all-seeing at birth. He could feel, so being the peacemaker, he wants to create harmony. So he doesn't want to hurt his mother in birth. His mother, he says, is a 2. So she's the helper. So she's happy to have the birth and the pain because she's helping. He doesn't want to be born. 9s tend to have slow births because they don't want to, and whether they are conscious enough to not inflict in their mother pain. But the one of the 9 slogans is let's wait till Chris gets back. Why do today what we can do tomorrow?
Right. But so is the idea here that did you consciously choose this? What is the philosophy behind becoming what type?
Well, I think you probably consciously chose this, just like you chose your chart, but I mean, there's not a remembrance of it. But the idea here is that I don't think you have one number that every lifetime. I think that you change sex, you change country, you change, rich, poor, you need to get all of the focuses in order to, quote unquote, mature. So I think you just have a story for this life. It's a pour. He talked about it as that you make a sand castle, not a sand cone. You make a cone of sand, and then you take water and you pour it on the top, and it's going to make its own shape and pattern. The water is going to make its own ruts. And he called that the chart. That the idea that you have that I can see it in the chart, and I want to, and I'll give you that in a minute, but I wanted to see if you had other questions about the Enneagram before we move to connecting it with astrology. I'm going to do that I'll do that. I'm planning to do that next when you're ready. But the idea here is that the psychological manifestations of the Enneagram are seen in astrological signatures. And the key that he gave me, which may be a key for you, that I have never heard anywhere else, what he gave me was, this is the key, be ready, get the drum roll, is that we accommodate for our low energy, our debilitated planets. We accommodate for the low energy. The high planets, the strong planets are our skills and strengths. The weak planets are our compulsions and obsessions, and we compensate in our behavior based on our weak planets.
Mm. And that also shows up in the Enneagram. Is that the point?
And then yes, it shows up in the Enneagram. And so here is the deal is that in for signs we have elements and modalities. Okay, elements: fire, earth, air, and water. We have
Mm,
modalities: cardinal, fixed, and mutable.
mm,
Okay,
mm.
in the Enneagram we have um instincts: emotion, anger, and fear. Fire, earth, air, and water. It's the same.
Okay.
In Enneagram, we have outward, inward, and neutral. In astrology, we have cardinal, fixed, and mutable. They're very much the same.
Okay. So is that how you would work with the combining it?
That's how we begin to work with it. So for the anger types, for the triads, this is a lot of triads in astrology.
Yeah.
Enneagram is 9. It's full of triads, 3 times 3. Okay, so for the triad, the anger triad, those are Mars and Sun. They are Mars and Sun debilitated, not necessarily debilitated, but afflicted on the
Okay.
low side. For 8, they're strong. For 9 and 1, they're weak.
Yeah.
For the
For 8, can I just ask you,
Please.
in the 8, I've come to see people with a prominent Chiron in Aries who has that 8 type personality in the Enneagram. What do you think about that? Do you use Chiron at all?
I don't use Chiron at all. And I find that I got to tell you that it's not a one-to-one. The closest one-to-one is Jupiter and 7. But
Yeah.
it isn't a one-to-one, and it isn't really signs. It's more strength and weakness.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Chiron and Aries, a lot of people have that, but it has to be like a prominent placement, and it is what you say. It is within that Mars symbolic. So that's Aries Mars you were talking about with.
Yeah, the Mars, the Aries is strong and fiery, and 8s are strong and fiery. But the nature of the 8 chart is going to have very strong planets and a lot of singletons. They're not stuck with retrogrades. They're mostly more direct. I mean, it's not to say that they won't. Maybe the moon will be retro. Well, moon doesn't go retrograde, but maybe the Venus is retrograde because they have trouble telling the truth. They have trouble living in truth and being authentic. They don't want to. They aren't very authentic because they're very authentic 8s because they'll what you see is what you get, but they're not very authentic in terms of their vulnerability, in terms of sharing it. And so maybe the Venus might be retrograde, but they generally have very strong planets and a lot of singletons, and there's a lot of power all over the chart. And but there's usually the moon might be a little diminished or a little weaker because they can't. While the heart is strong and they can be very loving, they're not very outwardly seen, where there are other types like a 4, which is totally emoting all the time. So the for the image types, the 2, 3, and 4, the emotion based, it's Sun and Venus, and they're weak. They can't find themselves, and they don't feel good about themselves. Sun weak. And Venus, to me, is integrity on the high side, and emotional, and judgmental, and comparing, and self-righteous and blaming on the low side. And so they have the shame. 2, 3s, and 4s have shame. And so shame is the low Mercury, excuse me, low Venus.
Mm,
Okay. Now for the fear types, we see a weak Saturn and Mercury. Why? Because it's a mental type, because they're in their head. It's a mental type. And so that's a weak Mercury. And then the weak Saturn is the fear, which is the core trigger. So those are for the triads. And then and I can go through this if you want, then each sign, each Enneagram point has its own within that. So I will look maybe initially, is it Venus? What is, I have a chart and I'm wondering, I'm going to give a reading next week. And so I'm wondering what their Enneagram type is. So I look to, is it Sun? Is it Sun? Is it Mercury? Is it Saturn? Is it Venus? Is it Mars? And so I look there to see what is triggered. Where is the tension? Where is the resistance in the chart? Where is the growth need to be? Not in the strength so much, but for the assertive types, there will be strength. 3, 7, and 9, there will be strength, but there's, I'm looking for the debility and the weakness, because that's how it's going to play out. And so I can get to a triad, and then, a lot of the time I can kind of figure out what it is, but I mean, not every time. It's not 100% science, and it doesn't need to be. I mean, it's 100% true, but that doesn't mean the people who can't figure out their type, if you look at their chart, it's not so clear there either.
This is really good, Indra. Thank you for bringing this up, because that's definitely a difference, right, between astrology and the Enneagram, that in astrology, we can look it up for you. Of course, there's a lot of layers to it and a lot of interpretations in that same chart, but still, it's like, this is what you got. And in the Enneagram, you have to take a test, or you have to, I mean, I've had different really great teachers in the Enneagram tell me what type they thought I was. And I'm pretty sure that, they probably were influenced by some impression or projection or something, right? So
Absolutely.
so that's pretty interesting that it's not
Let me
that
explain. Let me
clear.
explain this to you. The difference between them, I like to say, is that the astrologer is the track coach. They're looking at elbows and knees because they wanna get that 100-meter time down by tenths. That's important to them. So Venus is this, Mars is this, Jupiter is that, this is this, this is this, this is this. It's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And I call it a narrow viewpoint, because it's very particular to this, and it doesn't describe it as a whole. If you know Mark Edmund Jones, the whole view, taking a look, 1930, taking a look at the chart from back. This is more like Enneagram. Enneagram is like the fan in the stands. They're looking at the whole race. They're looking at the whole race. There's no elbows and knees, unless they're
That's how astrology should be, I have to say. That's how astrology should be, right? Like, look at it
well,
holistically.
I won't say should be, but the fact is that there's a lot of value in getting out of the
Yeah,
minutia and looking at it from a higher way. There's a lot that Enneagram can bring to astrology, just
sure.
like there's a lot that astrology can bring to the Enneagram. This has been a life's work, and the fact that the other one doesn't get it isn't really a problem. But we are now coming closer to the time when with the time I have left, I'm going to try to, I'm ready to take it even more forward. I really needed my own solidity in that, and I'm coming out of my Saturn period into my Mercury period. If you know Vedic astrology and the Mahadashas.
I do not know Vedic astrology. I'm only evolutionary astrology. So you
Okay.
can definitely explain that if you want to.
Okay, so Vedic astrology has this the timing system. I don't use progressions. I
Okay.
don't use transits. I'm not interested in aspects.
Okay.
Okay, and why? Because if your neighbor makes noise and it disturbs you, whose fault is it? I'm asking you this question.
The neighbors.
Well, when you're young, it's the neighbors, but eventually you come to the reality that if it disturbs you, that you've got to find that place in yourself, because it's the fourth neighbor that has disturbed you. It's the ninth bad relationship you've had. It's the 14th boss that you've complained about. At some point, you get to realize it's yourself. And so my point is that the outside energy, that we have to learn to not blame outside energy, that this is a problem with astrology, is that it wants to blame Chiron, and it wants to blame Saturn square, and it wants to blame Pluto this, and it wants to blame this. And I don't think I don't think we need any blaming. But if you want to understand it, it's your core reaction. What is squared? That's where the problem lies. It's in the natal planet, meaning if your neighbor makes noise and you're happy, then you don't hear it and don't care. But if you're triggered and unhappy because you had a bad day, then you're going to blame the neighbor, but it's your own off-centeredness that's the cause. That's the way I look at
I like that.
therapeutic astrology.
Yes, your own off-centered. I like that. Yeah, and yeah, just the way that we can be swayed with by whatever comes along of external stimuli. So yeah, I like that point. And definitely, I mean, blaming the planets, that's never a good idea. Like blaming the neighbor, right? So it's a way,
Yeah.
it's your approach to astrology. It's how you use it. Definitely, yeah.
Absolutely. So I'm more interested. The Mahadashas are so I don't use for the timing, we have Mahadashas. And the teaching says that in a 120-year cycle, each of our 9 planets, which are not the outer planets, they include the nodes, which we call Ketu and Rahu, north and south node of the moon. That each in a 120-year cycle, each of the 9 planets has a particular set amount of time that they are the most important in your life. And they have a length of period from 6 to 20 years. They have a particular cycle. It goes Sun, Moon, Mars, Rahu, Jupiter, Saturn, Mercury, K2, and Venus.
Mhm.
And I'm about to end my 19 years of Saturn, of which the teaching and the learning went on and the depth went on. And now I'm coming up into Mercury, that it's time to share that. And this is true for everybody. And it starts based on your moon, the degree of your moon. And so you drop into, you don't start at the beginning of this 120-year cycle. You drop in where you are based on, they take, there's 320-year cycles in a 360-degree chart. And so starting Aries, starting Leo, and starting the 10th sign, no, not the 10th sign, excuse me. So it would be, there's 3 cycles, so 4. So starting at the fifth sign, and at the 9th sign, Capricorn, Sagittarius, that starts the moon cycle. So wherever whatever you're born is, you start that cycle. So I happened to start fairly near the beginning of the cycle, 2 years from the end of Venus. And now in my later years, I've now come through Saturn in 60s and 70s, which I thought would be a bit of a bummer, but it actually was, incredible. I've been living in a cave for 19 years, but I've come to find that there's enough texture in that cave to last me the rest of this life
What
and many more lives. And so I'm actually having a little bit of I don't know if your astrologists out there can believe this, but I'm actually having Saturn withdrawal, because all the focus and discipline, being a 7 and being a Jupiter person, and not really, and having fear from Saturn, not the focus and discipline from Saturn. The focus and discipline came, and now this summer that focus and discipline is leaving.
mm,
Having visited me and having been having fallen in love with it, it's now disappearing, and I'm learning to live with that. So I'm moving into the Mercury period.
got it, got it. I not totally got it. Just I got that you have said what you have said, but I mean, this is a study, right? I'm not going to pretend that I just understood all of that. But I want to ask you, what is it that's truly in your heart that you want to share? Because that really was moving to me, that you said the last bit of my life here, the rest of my life, I'm going to spend it to share these things. What is the essence of what you want to share with people?
Well, I mean, the essence has to do with whatever I've learned. The essence has to do with astrology and Enneagram, but it's not so much about the sharing, it's about the act of sharing. In
Mm,
other words, it's more about the need to communicate and to share, It's not that anybody has to hear it,
Oh, okay. So
because
that
it's not ego driven.
no, I didn't receive it at that at all like
No,
that.
I'm not saying you did, but I'm saying it's not, since it's not ego driven, that it's not about people got to get it. I've got to make a difference. That is gone. Who cares about that? It's about me not being afraid to share.
Yeah.
Not that's not exactly what it is, but it's more on that level. It's about the self-realization of being willing to stand up and share it and be seen, rather than moving on to the next thing, the seven, the greener pastures. Instead of moving on to the next thing, it's more, it's what gets shared is the things that I've learned. But the point of it is in the sharing. It's in the journey. It's not in the destination. It's not about anybody hearing it.
Mm. Oh, good. Okay. Yeah.
Is that clear?
Yeah, I'm meditating on it. um, yeah,
Let me explain it this way. So I don't know how old you are, but in your age, the people that come to me in your general age bracket, you might be a little older than I would normally think. Let's say 20s and 30s. I get a lot of a purpose, and I don't think purpose is, I think purpose is mostly ego. I don't think purpose is particularly important. I think we have some destiny, but I don't think the destiny means that I'm going to be president or I'm not going to be president. I mean, we have free will, so that will come. But I think that there's a flow in our life. There's themes. There's the difficulties we have and the abuse we have as a child becomes a theme throughout the whole life. It doesn't disappear. It becomes your work, and so it's a destiny to we end up teaching what we need to learn. And so whatever happens to us is gives us a chance to learn, and then that's what we share. And so when I have the sixes have the hardest charts. When I work with a six and I'm trying to figure out something positive to say, because as a seven, I'm a positive outlook group person. And so what I've come to is that the only thing I can come to about all these debilitated planets and all the great enemies and all the challenges you have and all the doubts is that when you get it together, when you figure it out, then you can teach it to other people. And
mm.
you can be a better teacher because you've gone through it yourself. So the purpose, I'm
So
saying that the purpose of the difficulties we have is to teach other people once we figured out when we come out the other side.
I think that's a fallback line. I also consider myself pretty positive, and that's a fallback line, like to say, you can always use this to help people who've come to that situation as well. But I'm really curious about this, about the different personality we've talked about now. What about the combination, the different kind of combination? Because that's what I hear, that you're not just eight, seven. You have different.
Okay, so there are five personas that we take on. There's the core number. And then there are things called wings, and wings are the story on either side of your number. So if you're like a seven would have eight, it would have six on one side. So when I get triggered, then the coping strategy is to go to six, where I become doubtful. Like I say, I tell the story that I was about to give a talk many years ago. I was about to give a talk, and I had been preparing. In 2 or 3 days, panic sets in. So I said, well, nobody's going to come. And then I say, well, I'm going to be there. And then I say, well, nobody will like it. And then I say, well, I'll like it. So that's the six story. That's the going to the anxiety. That's the six story. My eight story would be more assertive and more arrogant and more bossy. That would be the eight story. Then in stress, sevens go to one, where we become the perfectionist. The easy veneer disappears, and we become angry and self-righteous and blaming, and things need to be done the right way. That neighbor better not make any noise because they're not doing it the right way. Okay, if they want to listen to the music, they need to close the windows. That's the rule of the one. And then in relaxation, I go to five, which is really interesting, because that's where the study in Saturn, that's where the study came in, was at five, that I wanted to know how things worked. But if I give the talk as a 5, then I become the college professor, and it's rather dull. It's better for me, it's not better for me, but it's more authentic for me to come back to the 7. That's my story. That's how I can share the enthusiasm that I have as a 7. It needs the depth of the teachings in order to be able to have something to share, but it doesn't want to share from that personality, because then it becomes dull and dry.
I can recognize
And
that.
so we each have these 5 personas, which would be your number, the wings on either side of your number, and then whatever your number is. If you're a 2, which is my intuitive hit, if you're a 2, then you go to 8 in stress, where you become bossy and angry, and the 2s are more authentic as an 8, because they let you know what they really think, but they won't let you know what they really think as a 2. And then in relaxations, 2 go to 4, where I like to say they pull out the crass projects. It's where they become more sensitive and creative. They don't do that at 2, because 2, the whole thing is to take care of other people. So we each have 5 different personas that we go to. I think that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I think it's a pretty good intuitive hit you made right there. I'm not sure of my type because people have said different things to me. I can sort of recognize it all, but definitely a 2, I think that shows up. That shows up. I think that relates to Pisces as well. It's within that Pisces frame anyway.
Just have strong Moon and Mars,
Was
and
that
weak Sun and Venus, and tend to be weak in Mercury. So as a 2, you're kind of unusual, because they don't like they're not very communicative. It's not that they have compulsions around communication. So as a 2, then you're doing this for your healing. That it isn't easy for you, or it wasn't easy at the beginning, to be able to communicate and get in front. But the green, the throat chakra, is really big for 2s, because they're always trying to get it out of their throat and be able to say what they really feel. That's very difficult for 2s.
That makes a lot of sense. That relates, in my understanding, to also to Chiron and Gemini. But you don't. But you must have so many symbols in there inside of you, but when I asked you in the beginning before we started recording, and I asked you like, so you are an astrologer and you are work with the Enneagram, and then you said, amongst other things. What else is there in you? What else do you combine?
Well, I think that it's mostly the readings. I mean, maybe there's other things in me in terms of being a gardener and a traveler, but I mean, I think the things is that I got into location astrology, and I found out the power of place to be important for a lot of people to understand, because a lot of people want to blame their place, and it's not very often part of that. That isn't usually the problem. I mean, it can be a problem for some people, but mostly it's really about themselves, their own reaction. I had a client this week that wanted to investigate place, but she's where her home country is like on either side. There's no lines for like 700 miles on either side. It's her. It's not astrocartography. It's not the lines. It's her. And she's a 6, and we can and I took that to her, and we helped her to understand that her fears and her apprehensions, that's what she needs to heal. So this location astrology, I was given a tool called the Wheel of Totality, which talks about the empty houses, and nobody talks about the empty houses. The empty houses, while astrology will say you look to the ruler, and I like to say, if you're going to have an operation, do you want the surgeon on Skype, or do you want him there? It's nice that it has a ruler that's 1 billion miles away, but it doesn't really affect the house. The house has no planetary energy. Each house contains awareness. And if you don't have a planet there, then it's a blank spot, or a place of ignorance. And we don't start working on these blank spots or place of ignorance until around 50. Why is that? Because if I tell you at 20 you need to open your heart, you say, No, I don't. But if I say you at 50, you need to open your heart, you're going to say, you're the third person that told me this week, tell me more. So I use the wheel of totality. I overlay the natal chart, because I use a Vedic chart, and I overlay the natal chart to find out what awarenesses are you aware of, and then use those as strengths, and where are the blind spots and the places of ignorance that you're trying to overcome. And it's spirituality. It has nothing to do with mundane. I like to say that it is way before astrology. It's not astrology as such. It's not astrology as such, though we're using the astrological chart. It is way before astrology. Astrology is very mundane. These awarenesses or attitudes are much, 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 much higher up in frequency, and are way before astrology, the mundane astrology, if that's clear.
What do you mean about that they are before? Like,
They're before. They're like, so discovering who you really are is the first house. It's not about personality. It's not about self. It's discovering who you really are, that you need to come into your identity before you can let go of the identity in order to wake up. And if you don't have a planet there, then coming into your identity is a challenge. And for many people, they don't really come into their identity when they have an empty first house and an empty fourth house, which is grounding. Then they spend 40s and 50s, discovering their identity. Once they can then come into their identity, they can let it go fairly easy because they're not very attached to it.
did you say
Second,
did you say once you come into your identity, then you can let go of it?
yes, that if you've been working for 40 or 50 or 60 years coming into your identity, once you come out into it, you can let it go fairly easily because you're not particularly attached to it. If you've been attached to it for 40 or 50 years, then it's kind of hard to let go. But once you come into it and you realize who you are, then you can let go of it. But you have to come in. You can't let go. It's a spiritual bypass. You can't let go of something that you haven't connected with, that you haven't deeply connected with.
Apropos slogans, I think of the, I hope I can remember this one. You can't leave until you arrived slogan.
Yeah, you can't leave until you've arrived. Absolutely. That's basically what I'm trying. I hadn't thought of, I never heard that one, but that's basically the same idea but once you arrive, then you can leave, then there's nothing holding you back.
Mm.
So the duality is the second house, and it's way beyond the people that have a planet there can learn to live in gray. People that don't have a planet there tend to live in black and white, and they get very judgmental. It's not about, it's the security of being able to live in gray, that you can love somebody but not like what they do, that you can be hungry but not meal hungry, that you can be tired but not sleepy tired. That ability to gray then gives you the ability in mundane astrology to then either figure out your security and your basic needs, or to at least let them go as being an issue, because you can see gray and you can see, while I don't have a nice home, I'm living in my motor home, and it's my my tiny home, and it's enough. The sun rises and the sun comes in, and life is good, rather than looking at what you don't have. That's black and white. That's very judgmental, small thinking. So that's how the wheel of totality. Gee, I can go around them all if you'd like,
Yeah,
but
what do
that's
you,
basically how it works. So then you ask me other things. So then the Navamsha chart, which you don't know about, divisional charts. Do you know about divisional charts?
no,
Okay, so divisional charts are also in Western astrology, but they were in Vedic astrology first. It's a divisional chart, is you can divide the chart by a number, and how they do that, I can't really explain it. There are ways between Western and Vedic. One will divide each house, and then one will divide the whole chart, but they have a way to divide the chart by a number, and then you get a divisional chart. And the divisional charts have a different vibration to them. They're a higher frequency of the chart. And so the highest vibration chart in the divisional charts, they actually go up to 60. There's 60 different charts, divisional charts. D1 is your natal chart. You divide your chart by 1, that's your natal chart, and then you go up to 60. So the ninth chart is called the Navamsha chart, and it's said to be the spouse chart. And I totally ignored it for 25 years until I realized that it's not the spouse you marry, but it's the perfect spouse. And so the Navamsha chart becomes a reading of you later in life. Who is your perfect spouse? That's you at your highest. So it becomes a chart of who you become in your 60s. And so I like to say that the natal chart is your strengths and weaknesses of the life. The wheel of totality are your deficiencies or blind spots. And when you overcome those, then you become your Navamsha chart. And so we have a way to look to use astrology in order to give us an indication of who we are and where we're going and what the challenges are, in a way to not box us in, but therapeutically, to plug your website, your name, to help the healing, to give us the direction. It's like an X-ray, in order to let us know that the bone is broken, and this is the kind of break it is, and it'll heal on its own, or it needs to be set, or it needs surgery, or whatever. You can see these readings help us to give us the insight. I'm not interested in boxing people in. The readings are designed more to give insight as to what's going on, because the insight alone will then initiate the healing process.
Yeah, that's really interesting that you can see in your chart who is the perfect partner for you, and then that's who you ideally, I guess, become yourself. Is there any meaning to that? What do you put into that? Like, what, I mean, does it mean you can't find the partner out there? You have to find it in yourself. You have to mature into that partnership.
No, because no, the point of partnership is to be a mirror.
Mm, yeah.
Okay, I mean the two rents on one excuse me, the two salaries on one rent is a wonderful addition for the partnership, and intimacy and companionship and are wonderful aspects of partnership. But spiritually, the point of partnership is to have a mirror, is to mirror back to us our own behavior, is to give us an opportunity to grow. That the resistances of the partnership are where we're holding on, where we're blocked, where we're holding on in our own personality. And so the spouse chart isn't about relationship. I mean, it is used in India to talk about the partner, but I find enough in the partner in the seventh house. I don't need to go to the divisional 9 chart, but who you become is the higher self. And so attention of two stelliums, perhaps, can be resolved in the Navamsha chart with planets in 7 houses, which is more spread out and a universal viewpoint, rather than, say, two stelliums, which would be, really, life is either this, it's either one stellium or the other. You're really living in 2 houses when you have 2 stelliums. But when you then become a Navamsha chart of say planets in 7 houses, just to use an example, then you're very much broad-minded, and so that's who you become, and you leave, you leave the tension of 2 stelliums and small-mindedness, and I need it the way I need it, and that's who I am, to become somehow in your 60s and 70s, all of the tensions resolve into that I see all points of view, and that I love everybody, and that I don't want to limit myself.
Mm. Huh. Indra, I have so many comments, but we don't have time. We're actually closing up. I just want to say to that last point, I guess some people come to that point, right? It's not just from aging that it comes, that where you can love everybody and you don't have so many
Well, not
attachments.
everybody has, I'm not saying that everybody has this situation. I'm just giving you a typical situation. I had a reading with a couple, um, 3 or 4 months ago, and I remember that the guy, his, and this isn't very typical, but his natal chart and his Navamsha chart were very similar. And so I said to the lady who was the one who initiated it, he was there, but I said to her, what you see is what you get, that he isn't going to change,
Okay.
and that the interesting thing is that she thought he was a 9, but he was a 5. And so when she understood that he was a 5 and not a 9, then she understood him, and everything came into place. And what you see is what you get, that his Navamsha chart, and I don't see this very often, but his Navamsha chart and his natal chart were very similar in terms of the flavor. I'm not saying that Saturn was in the 7th house in both. I'm not interested in that. But the planets may change a little bit so that he has a little bit of a different feel. But it was a similar look of a chart. It was there may be some differences that Jupiter may move from 2 to 7 and Saturn may move from 9 to 5. But that isn't really the important thing. That's just sort of a side story. But the general thing was the same. And so what you see is what you get. He's not going to change. And that's really good information. The stories, there are 8 billion stories, everybody's going to have a different version of the same of what it looks like.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. He's not gonna change. Indra,
Well,
this,
I think they were in their 50s or 60s anyway. So, but I
yeah,
mean, and it was a later in life relationship. But I mean, I don't remember. It's not about him, but that's what you can find, that it may not change. And then that. And she's trying to understand, where should she go? And it was a location reading. It was a deep location reading, because we did over 2 sessions, a bunch of different modalities in order to help them to figure out, what her needs were and what his needs were.
Indra, one last thing that you want to give to the listeners, that you want to say is really important. Maybe something that we've talked about, maybe something that we've missed.
Okay, so what I'd like to do I like to say at the end, people say, well, this is great information, Indra, now what do I do with it? So what you do with it is, what I came up with, what was given to me, is the 4 doorways to conscious living.
Ah,
Okay. The
yeah.
4 doorways to conscious living. You need to learn to observe. Okay. You need to learn to watch your own thinking and behavior, and you need to watch your reaction to other people's thinking and behavior. You need to watch your reaction to situations. You need to watch your reactions to other people's reactions to situations. You need to get out of the movie of your life, off the screen, into the audience, to have objectivity. Then you need to let go. The second doorway is to let go and release what doesn't serve you. Letting go involves being aware of a feeling, and some people are really good at being aware of their feelings, and some people aren't. You need to let it come up, let those feelings come up, and stay with it and let it run its course without wanting to make it different or do anything about it. The people that are very aware of their feelings usually want to do something about it. Feelings don't really matter. I mean, the point of the feeling is not the feeling. They're neither good nor bad. They're just feelings. It means simply to let the feeling be there and to focus on letting out the energy behind it. When letting go, ignore all thoughts. And then the third doorway is to love yourself. And in love, it's loving yourself, then you live in the moment. That's the fourth doorway. When you live in the moment, you love yourself. How do I love myself? By letting go and releasing what doesn't serve you. Now, if ice cream served you now, that's okay. You can keep eating ice cream. But whatever is not serving you, whatever personality traits and behavior patterns that aren't serving you, let them go. How do I know what to let go? Learn to observe. By learning to observe, life will teach you what it is that you're holding on to. So that's what I'd like to leave with people.
That's really good. So those 4 doorways, they're all interconnected somehow.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh,
Everything is interconnected somehow.
okay. So that's a
Not just those.
that's a great fallback line as well. Great spoken. It's all
If
into.
you want to meditate, there you go. That'll get you going for a few years right there.
That's one long pause in an interview. I have to meditate on that. Yeah. Oh, this is really good. Thank you so much to meditate on. Thank you so much, Indra. And I'll of course link to your page so people will know where to find you. Thank you for your service. Thank you for coming on here and sharing.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Wonderful.